Hey folks, I'm Alex Dowd.
And I'm Katie Rife.
With the year halfway over, today we're looking at some of the best films, performances, and screenplays of 2020 so far in something we're calling the Midyear Awards.
Welcome to Film Club.
Okay, folks, welcome back to Film Club.
Yay.
It's been a few weeks. We took a few weeks off there in the summer, but we are back with a brand new episode. Katie, how was your time off?
It was great. I actually didn't spend a lot of time watching films. I'm going to admit that. I think it's important to, I refer to it as airing out your brain every once in a while. And so I just kind of made a point of, reading books and, doing stuff around the house and going for drives, things like that. Things that don't necessarily require a whole lot of visual screen stimulation. I try to stay away from screens as much as possible.
I agree with you in principle. I have a hard time doing it. Every year when we leave for the holidays, I always tell myself, I'm not watching movies over the break. And then I usually make it about 4 days, maybe.
Sure.
I'm watching something again.
Yeah, there was one day where I watched, there's this competition show on HBO Max called Legendary, and it's like ballroom, like in Paris is Burning, but it's a competition show.
Oh, nice.
And I watched all of it in one day, so, I wasn't being completely, I broke my own rule a little bit.
Well, so we're about halfway through 2020 now, maybe a little over at this point. It's almost August, and it's been a very unusual year for movies. Every pattern that we've learned in our lifetime of going to the movies has been thrown out the window because of the ongoing pandemic here in the United States and in the rest of the world. As of recording this, they announced this morning the Venice Film Festival lineup, and it is not huge, and it is not packed with significant films, at least from the outside looking in.
Right.
And I think that we're going to see for the rest of the year, I think we're not going to see a lot of what you would call necessarily huge movies. For one thing, because Hollywood is, the Hollywood studios have basically said, if I had to guess, I would say by the end of the year, we may not see a single film open in theaters.
Yeah, it's possible. And, not only because of things being delayed, that are sitting on the shelf, but also this drought's going to last for a little while because everything that would have gone into production in the spring and summer just isn't. So, this could stretch out quite a while.
It could, although I think that's going to express itself in a slightly different way, which is that there are actually tons of movies right now that are ready to go. So I think that what we're going to see when theaters do open again, or when studios make the decision to start opening things in mass via VOD or digital. Although, again, I just think that there's no way we're going to see a Marvel movie unless this is something that really genuinely stretches on for a few years, and God, I hope it doesn't. But
oh boy, yeah,
yeah. Unless that happens, I think that what we're going to see is a long period of nothing or very little opening, and then once it is quote unquote safe for people to go to the movies again, we're going to see a bunch of movies all at once.
Well, that would be really fun. I look forward to that. If that comes true, that's actually kind of an optimistic way of looking at things.
Yeah.
Once the theaters open, it's going to be a big rush of movies, and we're all going to have a great time. I like that. I like that view of things.
So the Academy has announced a couple months ago that the way it was going to be handling this year, and I'll preface this by saying I'm not entirely convinced that there's going to be Oscars this year at all. But if they are, they're going to be later than normal.
Yeah. They've combined Oscar years before, I believe. That has happened in the past.
It's been a long time, though.
Yeah.
It's been a very long time since that happened. So their current plan, I think, is to they've basically moved the awards to April. And what they've done is they've extended the eligibility window through I think late February or something. This particular plan irritates me a lot, if I can be honest.
Okay.
Because I think it's the Academy basically saying the movies that we would want to nominate, the movies that are in our normal wheelhouse, may not be out by the end of the year. but they might be out a couple months later. So we're basically going to change our rules for the first time in 40 years in order to accommodate films that more cleanly fit the definition of an Oscar movie.
So they're showing their hand in terms of what they actually take seriously as Oscar movies and what they kind of look down upon or have contempt for, you mean?
Yes, exactly. Or movies that they would just never pay any attention to.
Exactly. Yeah, which is, hey, ignoring someone's a great form of contempt.
Yes. So, yeah, it bothers me because I actually think that 2020 so far has been kind of an interesting year for film.
Totally, I agree.
We ran a few, maybe a couple weeks ago, we ran a piece on the best movies of the year so far, which we do every year. And, looking at the 25 films we selected this year for that, unranked, they were just in alphabetical order, in chronological order from when they opened. I do think it's been a pretty interesting year for movies, and I think that we just have not seen much in the way after February. There's been very little in the way of big theatrical releases or Hollywood studio films or even stuff from mini majors like Fox Searchlight or something or Focus Features, because all of those distribution houses are all essentially waiting to release their films to a later date, possibly next year at this point. Because everyone's at home right now, because everyone is sitting on their couch, there have been tons and tons of films released to video on demand, to digital platforms. There hasn't really been a shortage of movies. There's been a shortage of the kind of movies that we tend to think of as maybe awards caliber. But
yeah, tentpole movies also,
right.
they're two different categories, but you're talking about like Marvel movies this year. That type of film is completely absent this year.
Right, exactly. But if I'm honest with you, I mean, those are not the type of movies that I ever find myself pulling for during award season,
Like, if they had come out, I wonder if any of if any of them would have ended up on our best films of the year so far list.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. Tenet maybe, if Tenet had been out. Although I think even with the timing of that feature, that wouldn't have even necessarily made the cut. Tenet obviously has now been removed. Tenet was sort of being used for a while as the barometer of are things going to return to normal? Because that was the movie that for the longest time they were insisting was still going to open in July. As all the other studios moved their projects way back or took them off the calendar, Tenet was like, nope, we're opening in mid-July. And then July rolled around and Warner Brothers said, okay, we'll open in late July. And then as the disastrous reopening continued unabated, sort of everyone realized that late July was not going to be possible, so Tenet moved to mid-August, and now inevitably perhaps it's been removed entirely from the calendar until some unspecified further date.
Yeah, as of yesterday they announced some plans to release Tenet in other countries.
Yes.
And this is my hot take for the day. I think that is completely understandable and maybe a good thing, because I think that if Tenet had come out in America in mid-July in the few theaters that were open, it kind of would have just reinforced bad behavior, to be honest. And maybe the Americans do need to see, if you get your act together and wear your mask and do what you're supposed to do, then you can go to the movies again. Like, I see no reason why Tenet shouldn't open in New Zealand right now. Movie theaters are open in New Zealand right now. I don't see why not. And, in terms of Hollywood business, the international box office gains in importance all the time. I'm not fully abreast on what the theater situation is in China right now. But, if other countries are ready to go, I see no reason why they should wait around for us.
No, I hear what you're saying. And I will say
Sucks
that...
for us, but...
It does. I think that one of the problems is that something like Tenet probably is built around a number of... sensitive plot revelations or twists.
Sure,
and,
there is that. The internet, yeah.
The internet is going to ruin this for a lot of people in the States, but I actually
that's
do think
we need to hear. We need to have some things ruined. We need to have some inconveniences. We need to look at the rest of the world and go, why do they get to watch Tenet and I don't? Because they got their act together. That's why. I'm a little tough love at this point with people.
Well, it really does underline the extent to which, and this is something that we've known, I think, for a few years now, but the extent to which the international box office is arguably just as important as the U.S. box office now when it comes to these giant, expensive blockbusters. I remember there was a certain turning point that I found significant, which was when a sequel to Pacific Rim got greenlit. And I remember at the time that Pacific Rim was discussed as this flop in the United States. But that movie made huge amounts of money overseas.
Yep.
And you kind of realized at a certain point that the Hollywood studios do not need it to make a bundle in the U.S. if they can make that money elsewhere.
Yeah, no, not at all. And there's certain franchises, this is a little tangential, but Star Wars never really took off in China. And so, Star Wars, that's part of the reason why Marvel is growing more so while Star Wars is kind of trying to figure out what to do and where to go, because MCU movies play really well in China and Star Wars just never really took off there.
That's interesting. It also explains why a number of U.S. blockbusters will have characters played by Chinese actors.
Oh yeah, for sure. For sure. Yeah.
they'll be like almost like shoehorned into the film sometimes, where it's just like
Yeah.
Here's a major box office draw for audiences in China.
Absolutely.
Well, so anyway, we sort of got off track there a little bit, but
sorry.
I think the point is that we've made it's actually been a kind of interesting year for movies. So
absolutely.
What we'd like to do today, I think, is talk about the year in movies that it's been through something that we're calling the Midyear Awards, and basically we're going to go through the major 8 Oscar categories, and each of us is going to discuss sort of our ideal nominee for each of those categories. Not the ones that we suspect will be nominated, because again, I think with the Academy changing its rules, I think a lot of these films, I can't speak for your choices because I have not seen them yet, but I will say that a lot of the oones that I have selected myself, I don't think have a snowball's chance in hell of being Oscar nominees.
Yeah, no, definitely. There's a couple I'm looking at here where it would just never happen.
Right.
There's only one on my list that I would put actual money on for the real Oscars.
Okay.
Yeah. Well, one thing I wanted to mention, we talked about it being an interesting year for movies. It's something that I've noticed is when I was making up my list, like a lot of the movies that I was looking at and including were written and directed by women. It's been a very strong year for women writers and directors. And you could perhaps be a little bit cynical about that and be like, see what happens when it's not overshadowed by tent poles. But, I'm just going to accentuate the positive and say that, people like Kelly Reichardt and Eliza Hittman, who made Never, Rarely, Sometimes, Always, and, Kathy Yan, who made Birds of Prey, like they got a lot more attention. And Shannon Godfrey Peoples, who made Miss Juneteenth, they all probably got more attention in their films did than they would have if they weren't, if it was normal circumstances and they were being overshadowed by big blockbusters.
I like that, although I will say that the depressing response to that might be that a lot of the studios that are handling some of these films sort of see them as ones that, oh well, people can just watch these at home. They don't need their theatrical release.
Yes.
Do you know what I mean?
Yes. There's a lot of, this is a topic for a whole other podcast about like what types of movies do women get hired to direct? What types of, women directors, films that are quote unquote more personal or, quieter, indies and stuff like that tend to have more women directors because there is still this bias that a woman isn't really capable of taking the reins of a big blockbuster production.
Right.
Yeah. That's a whole other thing.
Yeah. Let's kick this off with the Screenplay Awards.
Yeah.
Let's talk about the Screenplay Awards first. My favorite category growing up, and I actually do think in terms of the Oscars, the category where often some of my favorite films of the year actually do end up doing pretty well.
Truly. Screenplay is where the movie that should have won wins.
Right, exactly.
A fair amount of the time, yeah.
Where Spike Lee or Charlie Kaufman can represent for the year in film, So let's start with original screenplay. If we're going to play by by Oscar rules, I guess, and divide the screenplay categories into two. We'll start with original screenplay. That is a screenplay written with no prior source material, just a movie written directly for the screen. What's your pick, Katie?
Mine is a little bit out of the box, but this is a movie that I think about a lot, and I think that the reason that I picked it for screenplay is because the story is so inventive, and the way that it's structured is really surprising and inventive. I went with Bacurau, which was written by Kleber Mendoza Fijo and Juliano Dornelles. Please forgive me. I probably pronounce those Portuguese names more like Spanish ones, but yeah, that's the one that I picked. That is a Brazilian. This one actually played at Cannes last year and came out in March, and it does this really inventive genre exercise. You know, if you read the review, I pretty much say what happens in it, but I'm not going to say here. But it turns halfway through, and it kind of accomplishes two different types of films in one, while also lightly teasing both of the styles of films. Like, it starts off as, a sort of low-key slice of life in, rural Brazil, which is the type of film, you expect to see. It's kind of playing on art house expectations, which I think is very fun.
Yeah, I mean, the movie sort of, it's set in this small village in Brazil, and for a little while, it sort of looks like it's just going to be this kind of affectionate portrait of life in rural Brazil, where we're just going to we meet this kind of ensemble of characters. There's a doctor and various other townsfolk, and at a certain point in the film, I feel like the movie's political aspirations are clear very early on.
Yes.
But at a certain point, the thing takes a very sharp, jarring pivot into we'll say pulpier genre fare.
Yes. It turns from the type of movie that you would see in a film festival catalog, a film that you would like these kind of like slice of life dramedies, international ones. Film festivals are full of these. And then it turns into, I guess, a Midnight Madness tip selection halfway through.
Yeah, pretty much. Okay, so Katie, my pick is actually another film that premiered at Cannes last year, a lifetime ago at this point.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah, and it's another sort of genre-inflected drama, and the film is The Whistlers.
Yes, I like this one. Yeah.
Yeah, it's the new film from Corneliu Porumboiu. He's a Romanian filmmaker who kind of specializes in films that weaponize your tedium against you in some ways. Like, he is sort of an expert at deliberately boring setups and deliberately boring scenarios.
Spoken like a man who's watched Satan Tango for no reason at all, just because.
Yeah, I'm a big fan of boring cinema in general, but his films are sort of deliberately play with tedium in some ways, and they can be very funny. He made a film called Police Adjective many years ago, and another one called The Treasure that kind of snuck up on me. That is literally has two characters wandering around a yard looking for buried treasure, and there's just long sequences of them pushing this beeping device around the backyard, and like, to a certain sensibility, that sound effect, the beeping, becomes funnier the more that we hear it in these sort of long takes where we're just watching them. Yeah. But The Whistlers is a real change of pace for him.
Yeah, what's interesting to me about your choice of this when you're talking about The Whistlers, to me what really struck me about this film was the direction, because he pulls off this really specific, really cool, interesting, that is subdued but also colorful at the same time. He pulls off this very tricky tone in the film. So what was your thought in giving it a screenplay award?
I just think it's very cleverly constructed in some ways. The film is kind of his version of, honestly, something like a Tarantino crime caper.
Yeah, totally.
And I think that it's nothing revolutionary, honestly. But I think that the way that it jumps around in time, and the way that it sort of keeps us on our toes, and unfolds this caper is pretty clever and well constructed. I do think you're right that it's also kind of a triumph of direction.
Yeah.
Really, I mean, for me, a big part of this movie's appeal was just seeing this director who I thought I had pegged take such a wild left turn in some ways. I mean, the movie opens with Iggy Pop's The Passenger, and I wasn't sure at first if that was a joke. I was
it's a very Danny Boyle kind of touch, and I think that it is kind of goofing on the post-Snatch crime cinema as well, which is kind of a piece with the Tarantino. It's all that boldly stylized late 90s, early 2000s style.
Because it's not really a subversion of those kind of movies. It's just kind of doing them, in its own Romanian register, Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So his films are all about life in modern Romania, and about living life in a sort of a pre-dictatorship world, a post-dictatorship world, and this I think is slyly about that too. It just, unlike his other films, it just wraps all of that in this really this fun, deadpan, delectable crime yarn, basically.
Yeah, and it's got dialogue that's whistling too, so that
exactly.
Pure novelty factor. That's pretty cool.
Folks, if you would like to hear more about that film, I mean, for one, we have a review up on the site, but also Katie and Ignati discussed it back in the spring before everything shut down on an episode of Film Club, so you can check out the video of that as well.
Yep.
Okay, so let's move on to adapted screenplay. Now, by Oscar rules, adapted screenplay honors a script that is based on a piece of work that was created in a medium other than film. Although I will say that they also include sequels a lot of the time, which I never totally understood.
Is it because they didn't create the characters, maybe?
I guess the idea is that it's based on a previously existing work. So the previous film would be the source material. But the question I always have with adapted screenplay is, are we looking at the best screenplay that happens to be adapted from something else? Or are we looking at the best job adapting something? Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, no, I tend to take the latter path because, I mean, you're making a distinction. You're splitting it up into 2 awards. It's not just best screenplay. And so I like to look at it in terms of adaptation. And, to go back to last year's Oscars, I think a perfect example of this is Greta Gerwig's Little Women adaptation. I think that's the maybe not the platonic ideal, but it's an excellent example of an adapted, what I want to see in an adapted screenplay.
Yes, exactly. The sort of remaining true to the spirit of the work while also transforming it. Okay, so what's your pick for adapted screenplay?
My pick for adapted screenplay is the screenplay for Shirley, which is by Sarah Gubbins. I liked this film quite a bit for a lot of reasons, but when I thought about it, what I liked is that it's based on a biographical novel. And so the screenwriter, she was pulling in all these different things to create a portrait of a person, right? She was pulling in a biographical novel. She was pulling in Jackson's own work. She was pulling in Jackson's own life. And she's taking all these sources and putting them in, and it is one of my favorite kind of biopic, which is a contained biopic, which doesn't try to capture the entire scope of someone's life, but dramatize events in someone's life that sort of show who they are as a person. And for this, she took, she kind of played mix and match with different parts of Shirley Jackson's life to create, kind of shook them up in a bag. So it's not a terribly, you shouldn't take it literally. The circumstances in the film, her actual life circumstances were slightly different. It's just sort of like a collage of different parts of her life all put together into this fictionalized incident. And I think that the way it did that, it really turned into a very interesting portrait of a very specific person who is shown in, a complex person who's shown in their complexity. You feel sorry for her, you laugh with her, you're repulsed by her. It's a very complex portrait pulled together from a lot of different sources. So
cool. Yeah.
Yeah.
I have to go with First Cow. Kelly Reichardt's film about a couple of men who meet on sort of the Oregon frontier in 1820 and decide to start a business making pastries. And they have to do so by stealing milk from there's like a rich landowner nearby who's selling milk. We've talked about the show, or we've talked about the film on the show before, so there's another episode on that as well. And I think it's a film that works on a number of levels, and in an ideal world would probably be up for a number of Oscars. In a very ideal world, I guess, saying that this is a much smaller and quieter film than the Oscars normally gravitate towards. But I do think that the screenplay is really strong as well. Reichardt co-wrote it with Jonathan Raymond. He's a novelist and short story writer, and he's become over the years sort of Reichardt's regular screenwriter. She's adapted a couple of his short stories. And she made both Wendy and Lucy and Old Joy are based on stories from a collection of his, and he also wrote the screenplays for Meek's Cutoff and Night Moves. So this is sort of their latest collaboration. It's based on a novel of his called The Half-Life, and I think one of the things that's interesting about the script is that The Half-Life is a more sprawling story than the one that we get on screen. It actually like jumps continents, and there's a whole there's like a parallel story that takes place in modern times that sort of offsets this story that we're seeing, this friendship that we're seeing in the 19th century.
When I interviewed Kelly Reichardt, it sounds like their process is very collaborative. You know, she reads the novel, they sit down and talk about what parts, and she kind of decides what parts she wants to pull out, and then together they sort of take, you know, what she wants to take from the novel and adapt that for the screen together. My interview with her is up on the site, but she talked about the process of adapting in the interview a little bit, and it is very interesting and very collaborative.
And that makes a lot of sense, because I think you can see a film where there never appears to be any degree of tension between how the film is orchestrated, between how it's directed, and the screenplay. It definitely is something that feels built from the ground up.
Yep.
In this case, I think that, we were talking a little bit off mic about how sometimes when we talk about what we value in a screenplay, a lot of the time I think people think of it as almost synonymous to best dialogue.
Yeah.
Or something,
Yeah.
And I think the dialogue in this is memorable, but I think a lot of what we end up attributing to other aspects of a production, sometimes even to things like directing, are right there in the script as well. And I think that this thing. I think one of the things that I like so much about this film is that it's one of many films that came out this year that has a critique of capitalism in it.
Indeed.
But it kind of bakes that into sorry. It sort of bakes that into this very sweet story of friendship between these two men. And the movie's kind of social and political ideas never overwhelm this small human story she's telling, and I think that begins on the page.
And I think that's the key to success, like that the critique is like visible in there. You don't have to tie yourself into knots to find it. But overall, you could just watch it as like a very sweet story of friendship and non-toxic masculinity. If someone goes, oh, toxic masculinity, what's non-toxic masculinity? Sit them down and make them watch First Cow.
First Cow. Yeah, First Cow is non-toxic masculinity.
Non-toxic. 100% organic masculinity.
All right, well, cool. So let's move on to the acting categories.
All right.
And we'll start with the supporting.
Yes.
With the supporting performances. Supporting actress, who's your pick?
Okay, I went way outside the box with this one.
Okay.
In the sort of spirit of this strange year we're in. If there was a best ensemble award that we were giving out, I would give it to Birds of Prey. And specifically, I'm going to give an award to Mary Elizabeth Winstead for her performance as Huntress in Birds of Prey, because she did a great job both with the action parts and she is absolutely hilarious in the part. So she's playing a member of the ensemble, the Birds of Prey, the DC Comics sort of female, I don't know, superhero squad. And so she's, her character was a member of a mafia family whose entire family was killed, and she becomes an assassin, a la Lady Snowblood. It's a very Mako Kaji kind of character arc. And in the film, Huntress is just very, very serious all the time, but the movie kind of plays it off, as a joke, how serious and because she's also comes across kind of like gullible and sheltered and unworldly. Like she's this supreme hard ass, master assassin, but she has no idea how to talk to people because she's just been training her entire life.
there's this very funny idea in the film that I actually think is largely expressed through her performance more than anything else.
Yeah, totally.
Which is just that she is like socially, she has no social skills because she's spent her entire life training to be an assassin. So you think of Lucy Liu's character from Kill Bill or something. If they really got into like, what if that character? What would it be like to have a conversation with that character?
Would it be like to go out to eat with her? It would be very awkward. And that's just, it's such a funny take on the character, and I agree that it's very much expressed through her performance, and the physicality of her performance really comes across as someone who could definitely shoot you in the eye from across a football field, but she is absolutely terrified of having to make small talk. It's a really interesting take on a superhero character.
Totally. Okay, so I went with an actress named Norma Cooling in a film called 14. Now, 14 is it's a drama written and directed by Dan Salit, a New York-based filmmaker. He's also a film critic. Basically, every critic in New York knows him. It
happens sometimes, It
does.
A lot of the French New Wave guys were film critics.
Exactly, yeah. Plenty of careers have, Paul Schrader's another one who started as a critic and became a filmmaker. Salit is, I think, largely a film critic and makes a movie every few years. I was quite taken by this film. It's the story of two women who have known each other since middle school, basically, and it's about the way that their friendship has changed over the years, and the film kind of establishes this pattern between them. One of them is a social worker, the character who Cooling plays. Her name's Jo. She's a social worker who she's a serial monogamist, and she sort of is always getting herself into bad situations of her own creation. She also, I think, grapples a little bit with depression and with drugs. And her friend, played by Tally Madell, who's also very good, her friend Mara, basically has become sort of her unofficial emotional sponsor. Somebody who frequently finds herself in a position of always supporting this person in her life, and no matter what damage it's doing to her other relationships in her own life.
That's very real.
Yeah. I think it's a really. I mean, honestly, I could have gone with this one for screenplay as well, because I think it's really smart. So it keeps kind of leaping forward in time, and we're seeing the way that this relationship changes over time. As the character of Mara sort of realizes what role she's serving this person's life. So I was not particularly familiar with Cooling before this film. She had a regular role in Chicago Med, which I think she was best known for. But in 14, I think one of the smart things that she does is that she sort of shows us why someone would be drawn to this woman, and why someone would want to preserve this friendship, even as she pulls no punches in also making her exasperating, in showing us why it would be impossible to be her friend as well, if that makes sense.
No, definitely. I mean, you always want something that complicates the sort of easy villain or hero narrative, as it is in life,
14, by the way, is available to stream from home. It's doing the kind of the virtual theaters route through Grasshopper Films, so you can, if you go to their website, you can find it. It's really worth your time, and this is the disclaimer I always present when talking about Dan's work, which is that I met him once, and that he knows a lot of film critics. They're actually one of our contributors for the site, for the AV Club, Vadim Rizov, actually has a wordless cameo in the film. He's just sitting on a bench. I mean, if almost every film critic who has seen this film has probably crossed paths with Dan, but please don't hold that against it. It's a very strong film.
I haven't met Dan, so.
Okay, good. Okay, so let's move on to supporting actor. Who do you got for that, Katie?
Well, for this one, this is the only one of my picks for this, awards that I think could actually be reflected in actual award season, fingers crossed. And that is Delroy Lindo in The Five Bloods. He plays one of the five bloods of the title, which are five Black Vietnam veterans who go back to Vietnam to ostensibly on a sort of tourist trip to visit basically where one of the member of their company died, but really to try to dig up some gold they buried back in Vietnam. And each member of the crew kind of has their own personality, but Delroy Lindo's character is really interesting, and he turns in a really great performance as he's a Trump supporter. He's a conservative guy. He's an angry guy. He's got a lot of resentment, about the way his life has gone and the way he feels that he's been treated by the world. And it's a perspective that it's almost more compelling when you don't agree with it, if that makes sense, because he doesn't take it into like a cartoonish screaming place. He takes it into a human place, so you can hear what he's saying, but at the same time, like you can say, I don't understand that viewpoint, but the way that he's conveying it, this character is really going through a lot of emotion behind what he's saying, and so the combination is very compelling.
Yeah, I have to agree with you. If I'm perfectly honest, Lindo was my choice as well for supporting actor. I think one of the things, that really stands out to me about the performance is that I don't know if Spike Lee has actually totally figured that character out.
Yeah, that's part of what's compelling about it, because you hear what he's saying and you're like, I don't know, but just the humanity of the performance is so strong and compelling.
Yeah, it's like Lindo kind of fills in some of the blanks
precisely
that Lee did not fill in, because I actually think that there is. I like The Five Bloods. I have some issues with it. I don't think it's a great film. I think it's a flawed one in some ways.
Yeah, it's not my top of the year, no.
Right, and I think one of my issues is that particular character he's playing is so interesting that a part of me wishes that Lee had made that the movie. I mean, how do you go from being in the 60s to being somebody in the 60s who has some revolutionary leanings, you could say, somebody who has some progressive ideas to the world. How do you go from that to being a Trump supporter in 2020? And I don't know if Lee ever totally makes that journey, which to me should be one of the main meats of this film. I don't know if he ever truly.
It's definitely the meatiest character. One of the meatiest character arcs in the film.
It certainly is, but I don't know if Lee ever really digs into.
No. I don't think he's super. I don't think Lee is super interested in the why, which is why I think that it is such a good performance, because like you said, Lindo fills in those blanks.
Yeah, he sort of helps us to understand this character better. And yeah, I mean, it's just it's a really powerhouse performance when it needs to be, I mean, he has kind of at a certain point in the movie becomes this sort of plunge into the jungle and this story of paranoia among these men, and he starts to take center stage a little bit more. There's this he delivers this really powerhouse monologue. Actually, let's hear it. Let's take a minute and just listen to at least a little bit of that monologue.
Bathe me in that lymphoma, Agent Orange herbicidal stew. Those army bastards, they scorched the earth with it, sprayed that shit in the air and the water, my bloodstream, my cells, my DNA, and my motherfucking soul. But I ain't dying from that shit. You will not kill Paul. You hear me? Hear me? You will not kill Paul. And the U.S. government will not take me out. I will choose when and how I die. You dig? You couldn't kill me then with 3 tours. You sure the fuck can't kill me now. Right on? Right on.
So yeah, I mean that's what Lindo's doing in the film. I mean he's a marvelous actor. Fairly recently, he kind of had a viral moment that I thought was kind of funny because there was a clip going around Twitter of him telling off somebody on Fox News that gained a lot of traction, and some people had to step forward and be like, it's a great clip, but like that's a scene from The Good Fight. Like he's not really on Fox News saying this. There's a whole scene where he's like talking to like a pundit on Fox News and saying, if you want to say the N-word, say it. You know?
Yeah, he's like, say it, go ahead, say it. I'm telling you, you can say it, say it. And the guy just doesn't do it.
And he's wonderful on that show too. I've seen a little bit of that show. He's very good. He's very good in this. It's nice to see him get such a meaty role because I feel like we don't always see that from Lindo. And I do agree that I think I don't know how the rest of the year is going to play out. And again, I'm not positive the Oscars are going to happen, but I think if they do happen, Lindo might actually have a shot.
Yeah.
So I will say since I want to give another choice just because we both agree on Lindo, and I will just stump additionally for Russell Crowe in True History of the Kelly Gang. So Crowe plays this Australian bushranger named Harry Power. He's sort of this outlaw figure who takes our main character, Ned Kelly, under his wing. And he doesn't have a ton of screen time in the film, but it's the kind of performance that he's playing this sort of vulgar rapscallion, and I just feel like I have not seen a Crowe performance with this much life and humor and energy from him in ages. I mean, it's at least his strongest performance since The Nice Guys, and I might say since further back than that even. He just makes such. I mean, the movie is basically about Ned Kelly, the famous bushranger, and how his childhood basically shaped him, and it takes that sort of legendary story of sort of Kelly's rise to infamy and says we're going to marginalize a lot of the exploits and a lot of the stuff that's been dramatized to death, and we're going to focus largely on his childhood. So it becomes this kind of origin story, but one that's also about the notion that Kelly was basically doomed to this life and to this fate because of the people in his life and because of the society and the conflicts he was born into.
And Crowe plays kind of one of those formative influences.
Exactly.
Yeah, and you said he doesn't have a lot of screen time, but I mean, and I very much agree with what you're saying, which is that he's not on the screen for a lot of time, but he is very, very potent when he's on the screen. He is he's a presence, a heavy presence, a powerful presence, a threatening presence whenever he's on the screen.
And he looms over the movie in a sense because if the movie is about somebody being shaped into the man they're going to become, we can basically watch it and realize that later on we can sort of see some of Crowe in the man that Ned Kelly becomes.
Yeah, totally. He's imitating what he saw.
Totally. And I think it's a total star performance, and it's again, there's not a lot of screen time, but that sort of makes it the ideal supporting performance, I think. All right, let's move on to the lead, the sort of lead acting categories.
All right. It's getting later in the night. We've had a couple dance numbers, a couple jokes landed, a couple jokes didn't land.
A couple useless montages.
Yes. People are furiously tweeting about who was left off the in memoriam.
That's right.
We're getting deep into it.
Okay, so who do you have for Best Actor?
Best Actor. So for Best Actor, I went with, we were saying off mic, a lot of and on mic actually, a lot of the more gentler kind of performances and films are making more of an impression this year. And so with that, I went with John Magaro in First Cow. Yeah. I really loved his performance as Cookie in this movie. It's a performance where Cookie doesn't say a whole lot, but he's sort of the opposite of Russell Crowe in Kelly Gang in that he is a presence also, but he just sort of radiates this warmth and good humor and gentleness, and he is the exact antithesis of what you would think of as a frontier man, because there's this very, I guess, macho sort of perception of what, you know, a man was like out there. But you know, he's also, he can take care of himself. He is resourceful. He's tough. He can do all these things, but he does it without a lot of swagger and machismo. He just is who he is and has this sort of quiet presence about him that is very comforting and warm. He kind of embodies the ideals of the film, I think.
I would agree, yeah. And I think we can tell almost immediately when we first see him that it's almost like he sticks out in this world. Like he does not belong in a world this grim and hard, you know?
Right. Like early on in the film, he's traveling with a group of settlers, and he's the cook for the group, and they give him such a hard time, you know? They're really cruel to him because they don't know how to interact with someone like this. They've probably never seen someone like this before.
Well, and I think one of the first things that we see, and this is just a moment from the movie that sticks out to me so much, and I return to in my head. I think the first moment we see him, he's like in the woods, and he sees a lizard, and the lizard has fallen on its back, and he kind of flips it over and writes it. And it's just like such a perfect little gesture that shows like how out of step he is with the brutality of the people he's with and with this world. I agree. It's a really warm, charming performance, and kind of a heartbreaking one too, I think. Yes,
because he doesn't belong in this world. Right. The world is not ready for him.
Okay, so I went with Jean Desjardins for Deerskin. Now, Desjardins actually has won an Oscar. He won for The Artist back in 2012.
That's right.
Yeah. He's a French actor, and a lot of his work, at least prior to The Artist, was in kind of broad comedies. So he's kind of a gifted physical comedian. I'm no big fan of The Artist, and honestly, it's always been clear that he's a very gifted actor, but I've never seen him in a role that particularly spoke to me. But he's quite good in Deerskin, and Deerskin is the latest sort of absurdist comedy from Quentin Dupieux, the French electronic artist who is now a filmmaker. He made Rubber a few years ago. That was sort of his big breakout cult movie. Yeah. And he spent the last few years making kind of absurdist one joke comedies.
I'm gonna stump for Wrong. I really like Wrong.
You like Wrong? Okay.
Yeah, I do like that movie. It is a one joke movie, but I guess I just always appreciate when someone really, really commits like they do Wrong. Tonally, content, performance, it's all committed, baby.
Deerskin is sort of a change of pace for him, and I think it, in its own way, it's also a one-joke comedy. And the joke is Desjardins plays this recently divorced man who's clearly going through something of a midlife crisis, who spends basically a huge chunk of his savings on a deerskin jacket. And that becomes his singular obsession. He just wants this deerskin jacket. Like he's obsessed with how he looks in it. It sort of becomes this metaphor for his vanity. But the movie turns into I don't want to say too much about where it goes. It's a comedy, but it's also one with some very sinister undertones. I think what's smart about it is that I think what makes it work is Desjardins' performance, and he increasingly it becomes clear that the character he's playing is not okay, and that he's not a harmless kook. He's actually pretty dangerous. But the movie, his kind of tilt into madness, Desjardins never plays like to the rafters. He plays it almost like an extension of his midlife crisis. It's such a vanity-free performance in some ways, even though he's playing somebody who's very vain. And a lot of the comedy is very dry, and a lot of it is it just sort of depends on his obliviousness and getting laughs from his obsession with this particular obsession. Because the film is really about, I think what the film is really about is, again, without saying too much, he eventually becomes kind of a filmmaker in a way. And the film becomes about this very wide chasm that sometimes separates what we assume to be the intentions of an artist and just the weird, like, perverse preoccupations that might actually motivate them. Yeah. And I feel like Desjardins captures that in his performance very, very well.
Cool.
Okay, so how about Best Actress? Who do you got for that?
Well, for Best Actress, I was really torn on this one. I I will say overall, this is like the year of Elizabeth Moss because she did 2 really great performances this year. But considering she has 2 great performances to hang her hat on, I'm going to go with Nicole Beharie and Miss Juneteenth. So in this film, Nicole Beharie, she's mostly been in TV. She was on this show Sleepy Hollow for a while. I don't know a lot about that show. I never watched it, but apparently she was very, very underappreciated on that show. And I've liked everything I've seen her in. She was also in Steve McQueen's Shame, and I thought she was great in that. And she's great in this movie. This is another more subtle performance. One thing I liked about Miss Juneteenth, it's a story about Nicole Beharie stars as a woman. Her name is Turquoise Jones. She lives in Fort Worth, Texas, and her whole life, the only thing that she's ever won is she won a beauty pageant when she was in high school. It's the Miss Juneteenth pageant, and she got a college scholarship because of it. And, you know, and she's still milking this. You know, she has a teenage daughter of her own at this point, and this is still her big achievement she hangs her hat on. And so she really wants her daughter to enter their pageant too. She's got it in her mind that, like, her daughter's going to win too, and then she'll get a college scholarship, and she's trying to live through her daughter, basically. And you could play this as a mother-daughter drama that's really high-pitched, a lot of yelling, a lot of door slamming, a lot of, like, you know, running away, and I know a lot of drama could happen. But this movie plays it, I think, a little more realistically by being a little more affectionate. It's a newcomer that plays her daughter, Kai. Her name's Alexis Chikaeze, I believe is how you say it. And they have a really, really good dynamic as mother and daughter. And Beharie plays the role. So now Turquoise, she works 2 jobs. She's at work all the time. She just doesn't really have a lot of time for herself. And she's so obsessed with this goal of getting her daughter in the beauty pageant that she doesn't really think about her own life or anything like that. And this is a pretty common thing. This happens a lot, you know, with single moms who work a bunch of jobs and pour everything into their children. But she doesn't play her like a martyr, but she doesn't play her like a tyrant either. She's just like, she's a sweet, nice person overall who has good intentions, but sometimes she just gets tired and snapped and gets disappointed and everything. But I just found it to be a very loving performance of someone who is really, really trying their best. And that comes across very well in the film. And so does the love that she has for her daughter. Comes across very beautifully in this film, which is, you know, another one of these more low-key indie pictures that is getting a little more attention because it came out on VOD.
And it came out on Juneteenth as well.
Yes, it had a nice tie-in with the pageant. Yeah.
Yeah, you're a fan of this film.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, you recommended it before on the show. So.
Yeah.
Cool. All right. So I am going to go with Elizabeth Moss.
Yay!
I agree. She's had quite a year. You know, I mean, we're huge fans of Moss here at the AV Club.
I've never seen her do bad. I've never seen her just completely fuck it up.
That's the thing. I've never. I've believed every performance I've seen from her, going back to, obviously, to her days on TV. I think I remember first seeing her on The West Wing, that she played one of the president's daughters on The West Wing. But she has done increasingly volatile work, I think, on the big screen.
Yeah.
Sometimes with Alex Ross Perry.
Yeah, she kind of specializes in women on the verge of a nervous breakdown, to take the title of a Pedro Almodovar movie.
and she kind of does that in both of her films this year, I think. And I think, but the one I think I'm going to go with is The Invisible Man. Mm-hmm. And it's not it's another film that I don't think you would describe necessarily as a particular awards magnet. Mm-hmm. It's a February monster movie, essentially, but originally this project, I think it's very interesting, by the way, that originally this project was supposed to star Johnny Depp as the Invisible Man, and now it's a film about a woman escaping her abuser. Draw your own conclusions.
Interesting. Yeah, that would have been a little too real if Johnny Depp had played the Invisible Man in this one. That would have been a little too real.
Yeah. Well, I think that his version of it was going to be very different. It was back when this was going to be when they were planning this whole dark universe thing where the monsters were like the Avengers and they were going to form a team or something.
Yeah.
That was scrapped, obviously, after the failure of The Mummy. Actually, the failure of both The Mummy and Dracula Untold.
Yeah, it took a couple difficult for them to let it go.
Exactly. So they sort of built the Invisible Man into this standalone, this sort of very sharp, I guess you could call it almost a gaslighting thriller. It's basically Moss plays this woman who is dating a scientist, and she escapes him, and it appears that he's committed suicide, but you are watching a movie called The Invisible Man, so perhaps you could draw your own conclusions about what happens from there. But I think she takes this is in no way a paycheck role for her. I think that she takes this part very seriously. And the thing about it is when you have a monster that you can't see, you kind of have to do certain things as a movie in order to make us understand that menace. And so much of it's almost like Moss in a way is playing the Invisible Man, because so much of her performance is reactive, and it's about her showing us the paranoia and the fear and the anger towards this character we can't see. So she kind of conjures that monster for us in her performance.
Well, you mentioned how Moss's performance, makes the threat real, and I would say that applies also in terms of the theme of the film, because it kind of makes the Invisible Man into, this metaphor for abuse and gaslighting. And that could come across as kind of hacky or even distasteful, but she conveys, the mindset of someone who is a victim of those things so specifically and convincingly that it really makes the theme powerful. It clicks, it works because of her performance.
Yeah, she elevates this whole project, I think, in a lot of ways. I mean, I think it's a smart take on this material, I think, in general, and I think it's very well constructed and directed, but I think that it's Moss who makes this into something that we can take seriously as drama on top of being like a good time at the movies,
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah. Okay, so Best Director. Who's your pick?
So my choice for Best Director is someone who this is her third feature, and this is someone who it's Eliza Hittman, who made Never, Rarely, Sometimes, Always. I saw Hittman's last film, Beach Rats, and it has a lot of similarities to Never, Rarely, Sometimes, Always, just in the execution of it and the techniques that she uses to tell the stories. But I felt that it worked so much better in Never, Rarely, Sometimes, Always. So I chose that film because I felt like that is a director who is really hitting her stride and has really found her voice and her style and a way to execute it in a way that is, serves the story in a very powerful way. Never, Rarely, Sometimes, Always is a story about a teenage girl in rural Pennsylvania who she travels to New York City with her cousin to get an abortion. She's pregnant and she doesn't want to be pregnant. And so they go on this trip to New York, and there's very little dialogue in the film. There's a lot of quiet, and a lot passes between the two girls just with glances, and there's a lot of sort of meaning extracted from what little dialogue there is. And in her earlier work, I honestly found this to be kind of stultifying. It was just kind of, time seemed to stop. But in Never, Rarely, Sometimes, Always, she uses it to convey this sense of intimacy and the sense of things that aren't talked about. And abortion is very much something that isn't talked about. And so that's why I chose that one, because I felt like it was someone really coming into their own in their own style.
Yeah, she has this sort of observational sensitivity where she's very good at sort of locating these little details of environment and character. I agree that this movie is a sort of a quantum leap forward for her as a filmmaker. I actually think a lot of that has to do with the particular material in this case. I've always thought she's a pretty good director, but I think that in this case we're looking at a film where the movie is about something that's very significant and timely, and it has this kind of has this people on a mission structure, that if her previous work was sort of at times felt, I wouldn't say aimless, but we're sort of just observing these characters, and at a certain point that we sort of reach our limit of understanding. In this film, there's these characters are going someplace, and there's this sturdy, dramatic backbone. We've talked about the film before. We did an episode on it in Film Club earlier this year. Definitely worth seeing, and I agree that that it's a well-directed piece of work.
Yeah, she just derives a lot of emotional depth from small observations in a way that is very thoughtful and to repeat myself, well observed. It's just a very, very thoughtful approach to directing the film.
There's a great scene towards the end where the character is at a clinic and she's going through a questionnaire. It's where the title comes from, and Hittman is smart enough to know to just kind of keep her camera trained on her actor, and to just let the implications of her emotional reaction to this questionnaire speak for themselves.
Exactly. Just even the volume at which she responds to the questions. Sometimes she'll say yes, and other times she can barely get a word out.
Right.
And that sort of subtlety is what I think really makes this a great piece of work.
I have a very unsubtle pick for Best Director.
Both are great. I like both, man.
My choice is a Chinese filmmaker named Dowd and he made a film called The Wild Goose Lake. Now, this movie it's basically like a gangster noir. The plot, I would say that the plot is negligible at best and confusing at worst. Sure. It could not really matter much less. It's the story of basically a gangster who accidentally kills a cop and has to go on the run, and he has more or less an army of police officers chasing him. So it's this manhunt thriller, and again, watching the film, I never connected necessarily with any of the characters. I never connected with this as a piece of storytelling, but as just an expressive piece of style. I found it gripping on a scene by scene basis.
Thrilling.
Yes.
The use of style is just thrilling in that movie. Yeah.
The use of light, the use of shadow, the way he films bodies in motion. I mean, the movie is kind of just a daisy chain of cool noir conventions in some ways.
Well, yeah, you said that the plot is kind of confusing at times, but honestly, a film like that, the plot is kind of incidental to these sort of images that are built up in the mind, to the sort of shadows on the wall of the cave, so to speak. And and in this film, he just does that so well that who gives a shit about the plot?
Yeah. And the way that he stages violence is so interesting too. I mean, there are times when he will pull way back so that we're watching a fist fight from a distance, which sort of emphasizes there's a comic quality about it. Other times he's abstracting it in a way where we'll just see a drop of blood fall on somebody and we know that a character has died. There's a scene that I would say almost edges into dream logic where someone is killed with an umbrella. It's just the whole film is just this glorious exercise in style, essentially, in style, and sort of makes the case for style over substance. And we often think of something like. We think of the idea that the best movie of the year it might necessarily also be the best directed film of the year, but I do think that there are times when material that is nothing special can be elevated by the right director and the right approach. And in this film, I feel like the story and the material is just a clothesline for this guy's sense of style, and I found it intoxicating from basically start to finish.
And there is absolutely nothing wrong with that. I love style over substance. Okay, so now we're down to the big award.
The big award.
Dowd, what's your best picture?
My best picture pick is The Assistant. Now, that is Kitty Green's film about, I want to say her film about Harvey Weinstein, but the fact of the matter is Harvey Weinstein is not a character in this film. The film basically follows a young assistant working for a very powerful movie producer. The assistant is played by Julia Garner, who you may remember from, you may know from Ozark or from The Americans. She has a significant role on that for a little while, and she's she's basically the smallest cog in this machine. Basically, she's on the low end of the totem pole. She is first one in, last one out. Just a hardworking assistant, and we never ever see or even we never see the character who is basically Harvey Weinstein in the film, and he's never even referred to by name. But it becomes very clear very, very quickly that this is a film about Harvey Weinstein and about the sort of the abuses he committed and the way that he was able to build a system of enablers around him to continue that behavior for years on end. And the movie sort of looks at that story through the lens of this procedural about what it would like, about a day in the life of this person who it turns out is an important part of maintaining that abusive system, but even as somebody who has no power, because she is a big part of her job is not just looking the other way, but making arrangements that allow him to continue doing this. I found the film completely fascinating. I think there's a real moral clarity to its decision to keep Weinstein off camera, because I think the film is really about the idea that he was not able to do this simply because he was a powerful person in the industry. He was able to do this because there were a number of people in his orbit who basically were willing to look the other way because there was money to be made, because they had their own careers to think about. And the movie does something very tricky, which is it sort of puts us in the position where it puts our main character she's shown in a very sympathetic light. We want to root for her. She's in a position, anyone who's had a terrible job can watch The Assistant. You don't have to be part of the movie industry. If you've had a shitty job, you can watch The Assistant and empathize with her and empathize with what she goes through on a daily basis. But the film also suggests that in some way she is a part of this system that allowed this to continue.
Yeah, and I think the choice to not, show Weinstein or say his name or make him a character in the movie also makes a point that it's not just him, that these are, structural systems that excuse and allow abuses like that, and it's happened other places. And I think that, choosing to structure it that way makes the point that it's the structure and the system that needs to be reformed. You can't just put one person in jail and say, great, done, and wash your hands of the whole thing.
Exactly. It's basically about the idea that Weinstein may be gone, but he left behind a lot of people who are complicit in their own way. And a system that's complicit. I will say that The Assistant has proven to be divisive, at least with audiences, I think. The movie earned some very good reviews when it first opened back in February or something, including my own, obviously. But I've seen some of the audience scores. I think people are not necessarily prepared to watch like a Dielman-esque procedural about the mundane day-to-day of somebody in the system, You maybe go into this expecting a sensationalized vision of the Weinstein story. That's definitely not what it is at all. But I think its power comes from that, from how much it's willing to sort of... Because, it suggests that what Weinstein was doing was built on an empire that had a day-to-day operation,
right?
And that there were people whose jobs were simultaneously to enable his behavior and do the other business of working at it for a major movie producer. Yeah,
and there is a certain like banal aspect to like the sort of abuses that he was doing. It's day in and day out over many, many years, and so there is sort of like an everyday aspect about it, which I don't think people want to see that, and they also don't really like to. People want to have there be a villain who gets caught and that's the end of the story, and saying like, well, we have to tear down this whole system that's designed to make it possible for abuses like this to happen is a way trickier story than, well, he's in jail now, so everything is fine.
Exactly. And this is not the story of Harvey Weinstein. This is not like a dramatization of how Harvey Weinstein went down. It is a story of how he was able to continue doing this for so long. Okay, so Katie, what's yours?
My choice is a film that has come up several times on this podcast already, and we discussed on another episode. My choice is First Cow. When I look back at the year, I really think it's a masterwork. I think that Kelly Reichardt is a master of her style, and I think that it just has it has, the word gentle keeps coming up, and it is a gentle film. It doesn't overstate any of its points, but it's a touching vision of friendship between two very sweet men. It is food porn. It is a buddy comedy. It is an indictment of capitalism, and it is all those things wrapped up into a very, a beautiful kind of delicate package of something that is very enamored with the natural world, which is, you know, one of Reichardt's signatures as a director. And I just really think that it is for her really not a step up, because, you know, Certain Women was at this level as well in terms of filmmaking, but she threw in a lot of different elements into this one and still managed to make it a very Kelly Reichardt kind of whole, which I very much admire. Yeah. And I think that it's a film that's out of step with its time, but it's also a film that's very out of step with our time. You know, a film that prioritizes cooperation and friendship and is just not, we're in a world where everyone's screaming at each other all the time. And so it's just such a refreshing, reassuring thing to have Kelly Reichardt scoop you up in her arms and carry you along for a couple hours.
Well said. I'm a fan as well. I think I actually might have underrated it a little bit. We'll see. I intend to revisit it before the end of the year. I think that by the end of the year, this is going to look like, I don't think it's going anywhere in terms of critical estimation. Sometimes when movies open in February or March, when this did, I think maybe the beginning of March, they tend to disappear as the conversation changes. I don't think this is going anywhere. I mean, partially that could also be a product of the fact that who knows what movies we're actually even going to see in the coming months.
Yeah.
You know? But this movie has stuck with me, and I think it's going to stick with a lot of people as well.
Yeah, I think about this movie a lot.
Yeah. Well, great. So that's the Midyear Awards, as we've decided to call it. Most, if not all of these movies, actually looking at it now, I'm pretty sure all of these movies are available to stream from home. So if you have not seen them, please seek them out. Most of them are a click of the mouse away.
I'll add that if you're trying to find one of these movies, there's a few different approaches you can take. You can justwatch.com is a website I use a lot. You can type in the name of a movie and it shows you where to find it, and that'll show you streaming services and VOD. But there's also virtual cinemas. So just look up virtual cinema plus your city and it'll show what theaters near you are. It's a VOD model where some of the money gets kicked back to local movie theaters. A lot of art house theaters are doing it. I know Bacurau, that's how that was released. So if you're looking on VOD and you're not finding these movies, try to look for a virtual cinema near you and you may find it there.
Yeah, there are a few that I think are still in that route. I mean, we talked about 14 and Deerskin. I think both of those you can still watch through virtual cinemas, I think.
Okay, everybody. Well, that's the Midyear Awards for Film Club for the year 2020. Please join us again next week. In the meantime, please be sure to rate, review, and subscribe wherever you get your podcasts.
This week's episode of Film Club was hosted by me, Alex Dowd, and by Katie Rife. It was produced and edited by Carl Blumberg. Our sound mixer and finishing editor is Seth Hafer, and our motion graphics designer is Julie Mullins.
And be sure to join us next week. We'll be kicking off a full month of programming themed around the films of Christopher Nolan, leading up to the hypothetical, maybe possible release of Tenet at the end of August. Until then, I'm Katie Rife.
I'm Alex Dowd. Take care.
See ya.